I'll be bouncing between my text and my slides. I have over 80 of them to share, and I'll be doing that. I'll be spending time with my text here as well, so I don't forget anything important. I have a lot to impart to you about St. Peter Claver and St. Michael's parishes. First off, of course, we have a new pope, a new bishop, a new pastor, and a new deacon, all within the past 2 years. The growth and such memorable events included the purchase and what we can consider an act of divine providence, the resurrection and return of the historic St. Peter Claver Catholic Church to our parish. While originally built on the corner of 3rd and Calhoun in 1924 for our African American parishioners, following its closing in the early 1960s, it was sold by the parish in the mid-70s for $10,000 and changed ownership several times until Father Eric and the diocese was given the opportunity to repurchase it for our parish and diocese in March 2024. If you don't believe in divine providence or divine intervention, one of the previous owners wanted to turn this historic church into a suds and cinema to seat 200 people. Thankfully, the HDC, the Historic District Council, and the city commissioners turned that down, hands down. But it was all of this that inspired me to date, as I said earlier, to expand and publish a second edition of the book that I researched and wrote for the 150th anniversary of St. Michael's. So, let's take a walk together through the history of St. Michael's and St. Peter Claver parishes. And I want you to know up front that I've taken the liberty, through interviews and additional research, to include a little more local and personal history to capture some of the more storied legacy to keep you all attentive and awake. And please silence your cell phones, and let's hold our questions until the end of the presentation. As it shows here in this photo, it shows a photo of St. Peter Claver Church in Old Town, there in the far right, in 1903, taken from the Amelia River, taken from the old harbor pilot sailboat, Francis Elizabeth. The chapel was built, the original chapel was built in 1867 by Bishop Verreau. This chapel, this church, replaced that original chapel, and it was built in 1895 by Father Anthony Kilcoyne for our African American parishioners living in Old Town. Everyone should know that our Catholic faith and heritage can be traced back to the founding of St. Augustine and the first permanent Catholic parish and settlement in the New World by Captain General of the Spanish fleet, Pedro Menendez de Aviles, and his expedition for King Philip II of Spain, 8 September 1565. He landed with 800 men, women, and children and called their new home St. Augustine because they had sighted land 11 days earlier on St. Augustine's feast day, 28 August. General Menendez wasn't just one of Philip's most loyal and competent officers, he was also considered one of the most ruthless. Philip wasn't amused by the presence of the French Huguenots in what he considered to be Spanish territory in the New World, and sent Menendez to reclaim it. What's ironic about this is the Queen of France, Catherine Menzies, felt that the Calvinists, the Huguenots, were threatening her French Catholic position. So she was the one who encouraged them to go and claim and settle in Florida. The Spanish attacked in September, shortly after arriving, and Menendez and his men destroyed Fort Caroline. Ribault was killed, and the French fleet was lost in a storm off the coast of Florida, off of not far from St. Augustine. He pursued them and massacred the shipwrecked members of the French fleet, except for about a half a dozen Catholic sailors. And that is why we call the bay there Matanzas, because in Spanish it means slaughters. Now that encounter between the Spanish and the French, that proved to be the first conflict between major European powers in the New World, and helped secure Spanish control of Florida for the next 235 years, with several interruptions by the British and some pirates and privateers along the way. As it was, our Catholic faith was established in the New World with the planting of the cross by Padre Francisco Lopez, chaplain of the Menendez expedition, with the words Nombre de Dios, in the name of God, and the name of the mission established there. We don't know the exact dates that the mission of Santa Maria was established on the northern end of Amelia Island, but historians argue that General Menendez built a garrison here on the island in the area that we currently call the Plaza San Carlos over in Old Town. As that garrison was supposedly established as early as 1566, 1569 to protect the Catholic missionaries and Indian converts. The mission moved south near the Harrison homestead in 1675 for improved defenses and better farming, and became a haven for Spanish missions along the coast of the Carolinas and Georgia to escape British and Creek Indian raids. This prompted a general retreat of all Spanish missions along the coast. Archaeologists believe there were possibly as many as 4 missions on Amelia by the late 1600s. Santa Maria, Santa Catalina de Gul, Santa Maria de Yamasee, and San Pedro de Tropic. In the 1980s, archaeologists unearthed stockade, skeletal remains, and a brass seal of Mission Santa Catalina de Gul. And by 1702, all those missions had been destroyed by the British, with only Nombre de Dios surviving. To put this all in some historical perspective, the founding of St. Augustine and establishment of Mission Nombre de Dios and Mission Santa Maria here on Amelia Island all predate both the Plymouth Colony, 1620, and the Jamestown Settlement, 1607. A little piece of history seldom mentioned is the establishment of the Spanish governor, by the Spanish governor of Florida in 1738, of Fort Mose. This represented the first African settlement of Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose, Royal Grace of St. Teresa of Mose, or Fort Mose, for those fleeing slavery from the English colonies of the Carolinas. At least 100 former African slaves swore allegiance to the Spanish crown and became Catholic. All the family, all the men and their family members, obviously swearing allegiance to the Spanish crown, became Catholic. And they comprised the very first black settlement, free black settlement in North America. Fast forward to 1859, we know there was a wooden structured Catholic church on the same site as our current church. Irish immigrants working on Yule's Railroad at the time helped to build it. The Metropolitan Catholic Almanac of 1859 states, Fernandina is a rapidly growing town where there is a church in progress of erection, and it is attended once a month from Jacksonville and St. Augustine. Parish baptismal records also reflect baptisms as early as February 29, 1860, by two French priests, Reverend Hilary and Alance. This is a photo again of St. Peter, the original St. Peter Claver Church in Old Town. This is taken from the Harbor Pilots Tower there in Old Town. And it's just it's a different angle of the photo you saw originally taken from the Amelia River. It was the church that was built by Father Anthony Kilcoyne in 1895 to replace the church that was constructed by Bishop Verreau in 1867. The reason I would point out that this was the original St. Peter Claver Church. The earlier churches would not have been called St. Peter Claver because there was no St. Peter Claver. Peter Claver was beatified in 1850 by the Catholic Church by Pope Leo XIII, but was not canonized until 1888. So this was the original St. Peter Claver Church. It's also very important for me to point out that some of these longtime residents of Old Town were former indentured European colonists. They weren't all former slaves. 1,400 Spanish Majorcans, Greeks, Corsicans, and Italians brought to America in 1768 by Dr. Andrew Turnbull to establish what would be the largest British settlement in North America in New Smyrna. Many were promised 50-acre land grants in exchange for their servitude. Many accepted, and many died from disease, native attacks, and cruel treatment. Those who escaped the failed colony in 1777 migrated to settle and form the nucleus of a vibrant and multiracial and diverse cultural Catholic presence in St. Augustine and Old Town. The Treyis were clearly one of the oldest established families and landowners in Old Town, and were joined by other long-established residents of Old Town and New Fernandina, like the Delaney's, McDonald's, and Clark's, Ferraras, Davises, Wasses, O'Hagans, Hernandez, Malarkeys, Kellys, to name just a few. Protestant and Catholic, black and white, lived largely in harmony. Neil Frank and Sister Beverly Frank Trey, Neil's here tonight, can tell you a lot more than I can about their background, but we know that their father had a 50-year career as the first black pogey fishing boat captain in Fernandina. Some of our residents and friends here today can trace their heritage to those early settlers long before the Civil War who were never slaves. Even Surveyor General George Clark, who replatted Old Town in 1811, contributed to the multiracial character of the community and married one of his former African slaves, Flora. Clark also indicated in a letter to the Spanish governor of Florida, Enrique White, that there was a church on the church lots in Old Town at that time. And the church lots are right there, next to Fort San Carlos and the plaza. And the first photo that you saw of that church was taken from Amelia River, and the second one was taken from somewhere up here where the Harbor Pilot's Tower would have been. According to the Florida Historical Quarterly, a professional German tourist visited the town in 1832 and described it as a city with 80 houses, 500 residents, a church, and a Catholic chapel. All would have predated the construction of the Mission Church in 1844, described in author and priest Michael Gannon's book, The Cross in the Sand. When the Florida Vicariate was elevated to the Diocese of St. Augustine in 1870, the Right Reverend Augustine Verreau, a native of Le Puy, France, became the first bishop of the Diocese of St. Augustine. Bishop Verreau was affectionately called the Rebel Bishop by his northern counterparts due to his vigorous support of Southern principles. Regardless, the bishop seemed to be a man preordained to lead the Catholic Church in Florida at a time of rapid development and social unrest before and after the Civil War. Father Henry Claver, also from Le Puy, was one of those priests recruited by Bishop Verreau during his trip to France in 1859. According to his diary, Father Claver was in charge of the Catholic Church in Fernandina and was chaplain to a garrison of 2,000 Confederate recruits bivouacked around Fort Clinch during the Civil War. When the Union Army occupied Fernandina on 2 March 1862, Union troops desecrated the church, stealing priest vestments and sacred vessels. Father Claver promptly traveled by mule through enemy Union lines to report the incident to Bishop Verreau, who was in Savannah. Despite the bishop's strong protest, which got the attention of senior Union officers, it's not known if the culprits were found and punished or if the items were ever returned. A little piece of history that not many are aware of. A squadron of Union gunboats and transports arrived with a battalion of Marines and a brigade of Army troops during that occupation to secure the port and town of Fernandina as the last train departed. The train was crowded and overflowing with residents, taking everything of value that they owned, with David Yulee and members of the Confederate garrison on board. Gunboats pursued the train up the Amelia River and managed to stop it. And it was the first time a Navy warship ever fired on a moving train and actually hit it. As the story goes, David Yulee hid and escaped capture in the marshland and spent the remainder of the war with the President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. Yulee was arrested in 1865, tried for treason, and imprisoned at Fort Pulaski, Georgia, for 10 months before being released by General Ulysses S. Grant and pardoned by President Andrew Johnson at Grant's request. Yulee later hosted President and Mrs. Grant here in Fernandina in 1870. Father Carlos Sotorio arrived as the first permanent pastor of St. Michael's at the age of 26 in February 1869 and served for a year until his untimely death in July 1870. He was cared for that summer by the Sisters of St. Joseph at their convent in Jacksonville and died there. During that year, the parish grew by 86 members, many of those newly baptized by Father Sartorio. His first baptism was administered to a young Negro boy, Samuel Pecky. This is a photo of Fray Miguel de Anon and his companion, Friar Antonio Badeos, who were martyred on what was St. Caroline Island off the coast of Georgia in September 1597. It was during Father Johannes Bertazzi's pastorate, 1870 to 1878, that the current church and sanctuary was built and dedicated on 29 September 1872 in honor of Fray Miguel and on the feast day and under the patronage of St. Michael the Archangel. Fray Miguel and Friar Antonio Badeos were among 5 Franciscan missionaries bludgeoned to death with war axes during a native Guale Indian uprising known as the Wanhila Revolt on St. Catherine's Island. The uprising is named after a young native Guale chieftain who was chastised for adhering to his native practice of polygamy. The stained glass window of the venerable Fray Miguel is located above and to the right of the church altar, opposite one of St. Michael's. This is on the east end of the church, where the high altar is located. As a result of a papal decree issued in January of this year by the late Pope Francis, declaring the friars true martyrs for Christ, they now all carry the title of venerable and will soon receive the rite of beatification and title blessed by the Catholic Church, bringing them one step closer to sainthood. Both pioneer priests, as many of you probably already know, Father Sartorio and Father Bertazzi, are buried in front of St. Michael's Church and the bell tower. And I always remind my Irish and Polish parishioners that they were both Italian. We are surrounded, truly surrounded, by a living history much within walking distance of St. Michael's Catholic Church, with its bell tower added in 1924 at a cost of $2,000 and dedicated on 15 August, the feast day of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The restored bell, and this is not a photo of the restored bell, the Raymond bell now sits on a platform on the north side of the church bearing the date 1924. It had to be removed from the bell tower due to safety stability concerns during the restoration. The inscription on it reads, "Under the auspices of the Ladies' Circle of the Church, this bell was principally the gift of H. Raymond. May its sound be heard far and near for the glory of God and salvation of souls." It replaced an engine bell with the date 1750 AD inscribed on it, which once graced the beautiful steeple and belfry of the brick church. Sister Josephine of the Sisters of St. Joseph rang the church bell for the Angelus prayer daily at noon until she was 83 years old, and townspeople set their clocks and watches by it. She served the community for 65 years and was the last sister of St. Joseph to be buried in Bosque Bello Cemetery. The Fernandez Reserve and Cemetery within Villalonga Park represents the last vestiges of the Fernandez land grants. The family cemetery is located there, and you can see Villalonga Park. It remains a gathering place for festivals and parish and community gatherings as it was in the past. Villalonga Park is also the home to our beautiful grotto in honor of the Blessed Virgin Mary, built by local contractor and parishioner Frank Mayer in 1950. The heirs of Don Domingo sold the remainder of the grant, then called Yellow Bluff and Lisa Plantations, where all of the city of Fernandina now sits. It was sold to none other than the first senator and railroad tycoon, David Levy Yulee, for $10 an acre. The entire block from 4th to 5th Streets and Broome to Calhoun, known as St. Michael's Square, was placed on the National Registry of Historic Places in July 1973. Our historic landmark, St. Michael's Academy, formerly St. Joseph's Academy and Convent, was built by the Sisters of St. Joseph with donations from the Fernandina community, selling their French lace, jams, and jellies, and with the gift from their mother house in Le Puy, France. That's the chapel, the academy, and the convent. It all began in April 1871 when the first two sisters, Marie Cellini and novice sister Helen, came to prepare children for their first Holy Communion at Father Bertazzi's request. In a letter from Mother Sidoni of the Jacksonville Foundation to the Mother House in Le Puy, quote, "Our sisters have only a single room for the two of them and two others for their classes." Now, they initially taught and slept there and lived on alms and meals provided by the parents of their students. And they later occupied a cottage on the corner of 8th and Broome. The sisters were well renowned for their lace making, and wives of Presidents Grant and Grover Cleveland were said to visit Fernandina on occasion to purchase the famous lace. This is a photo of Marcel Buck Kelly and Dan Malarkey, members of two prominent parish families at the time. I don't know about you guys, but if I had to name Marcel, I'd want to be called Buck too. This is a photo of Miss Betty Dressler with in the early 1980s during Father Tom Sullivan's pastorate. I just threw it in there. That Chris, that's altar boys Chris Spence and Harry Trey, being trained by Miss Dressler, who interestingly enough was a pilot in the Women's Army Air Corps during World War II, and then later a chemistry teacher at Fernandina High School. Consuela Vanderbilt was also a customer of the sisters, and you probably asked yourself, why would she be in Fernandina? Anyone have any ideas? Well, it just so happens that Fernandina was once considered the Newport of the South, where many of the wealthiest Americans of the day wintered as the original snowbirds. One of those families, the Carnegies, built Dungeness Plantation in the late 1800s on Cumberland Island with some 300 servants to man their self-sufficient winter home. The ruins remain, along with some 150 feral horses that have roamed the island wild since being introduced by the Spanish almost 500 years ago. The cornerstone for the convent and St. Joseph's Academy was laid on 15 January 1874 by Sister Noelle, one of the original French nuns who taught music with Sister Josephine to several generations of Fernandina children. The Academy opened its doors in the fall of 1882, with the third floor initially used as the residence for the nuns and used as an infirmary during the yellow fever epidemic in 1888. That epidemic ravaged the entire state of Florida and toppled a biracial city government in Jacksonville at the time. Here you can see the convent chapel was completed in 1884, shown here decorated with the sisters' fine French lace. The Phelan Verreau House, located on 4th Street, about half a block south of St. Michael's, was purchased for the sisters by Bishop Verreau in 1875, and it's where they lived during the yellow fever epidemic of 1877. It was nicknamed the Needle House because local women would throw their balls of thread and needles on the front porch. The sisters would use those to sew the many burlap and canvas bags together that they needed to bury the dead. Their selfless care for the victims of that epidemic earned them the title Angels of Mercy. Two of the sisters died from the fever within a few hours of each other on 21 and 22 September 1877, and were originally buried at their request near the convent in Villalonga Park. When their bodies were exhumed and moved to Boss Bellow 20 years later, according to County Sexton, Mr. Martin Henderson, when the wooden coffins were opened, the smell of roses filled the air, and their bodies were uncorrupted. Now, Mr. Henderson was a local official and respected member of St. Peter's Episcopal Church at the time. And the pristine conditions of the sisters' bodies are considered to be saintly by the Catholic Church. But efforts to have them recognized as such by some parishioners several years ago was inconclusive. St. Peter Claver Catholic Church on the corner of 3rd and Calhoun, as I said earlier, was built in 1924 for our Catholic African American parishioners. That was during the pastorate of Father J.J. Nevin, 1922 to 26, to replace the church in Old Town. Catholic parishioners were always welcome to attend either church. They often shared and alternated Mass times with St. Michael's parishioners in the front pews at St. Michael's, St. Peter Claver parishioners in the back, and the reverse applied when attending St. Peter Claver. And I hope Neil doesn't mind me sharing this little story about him. He's told it before, so I'm going to tell it, and I'm going to try to keep it straight. Neil shared a story that on one occasion, when his Uncle Harry dropped him off for Mass at St. Michael's as a youngster, he just got a good seat up front without anyone around him objecting, until Uncle Harry came in and quickly brought him to the back of the church. Is that true?
That's correct.
That's correct. But the point here is, nobody objected. Nobody. While segregation and Jim Crow laws applied throughout the South, for many of those interviewed, the multiracial and diverse cultural character of Old Town and Fernandina softened the local impact of those laws. A couple more quick examples. James Jackie Delaney characterized Fernandina as a great sleepy town. With Chief of Police Tom Hernandez, there was no violence, racial or otherwise. Jackie's mother and all her people were Catholic from Old Town. That for him, growing up, was, quote, always fully integrated. Neil Frink recalled that due to Father P.J. Halligan's illness during a Mass in the early 50s, he had his head altar boy, Henry Trey deliver communion to both black and white parishioners without any objection from anyone. And parishioners regularly got together after Sunday Mass to play ball or participate in some church-related activities, according to Wanda Blue. All agreed that there was always something going on at the church, which was the center of social activity. And this is just another photo of the church in Old Town. And I've already mentioned the fact that it was the original St. Peter Claver Church. And St. Peter Claver, for those who don't know anything about him, of course was a Jesuit missionary who cared for and baptized some 300,000 African slaves in Cartagena during his 38-year apostolate. And he was beatified, I've already said that. He was beatified in 1850 and canonized in 1888. His feast day is on September 9th. Father Kilcoyne, our fourth pastor of St. Michael's, graduated from St. Vincent's Theological Seminary in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where he entered the priesthood. Here's a better photo of Father Kilcoyne. He was one of the longest tenured pastors of St. Michael's, from 1884 to 1896. He should be remembered most for giving his life caring for the physical and spiritual needs of Catholics, non-Catholics, black and white residents alike, with the Sisters of St. Joseph during the Yellow Jack epidemic of 1888. He died at the age of 37 and was buried at his home in St. Joseph's Cemetery in Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1896. Here's the best photo I could find of the original, St. Michael's Church, with the parochial residence on the back. And you can see it was all brick at that time, with the beautiful belfry. Whoa. The St. Peter Claver School, located on Calhoun between 5th and 6th Streets, like the church, was also built during Father J.J. Nevin's pastorate with the aid of the Sisters of St. Joseph to educate African American children. That school had 80 students in 1924. It closed its doors in 1959 due to the lack of students. In spite of the heroics of Reverend Salvatore Profeta, who often procured a bus and drove it himself, or with the aid of a few parents, like Jackie Wiggins' mom, to try to get the children to school. Many of them, like Neil Frank and Wanda Blue, who attended the school, had to make their way through marshland at times from Old Town to get to school, and move to the Peck School and high school to complete their educations. A number of those former St. Peter Claver students, including Jackie, Neil Frank, Sister Beverly Frank Trea, Wanda Blue, and Elsie Green, who are all still with us. And Neil is here, and Wanda is here. They all shared a lot of their memories about the priests and sisters and the church and school and their experiences that really can only be adequately addressed in the second edition of this book. St. Peter Claver School featured a program of education from first grade to sixth, and you can see here tuition, curriculum,
Is that $1 a month or $1 a year?
I think it was $1 a semester.
Okay.
Neil, do you remember?
I remember my grandmother paying every semester.
What's
She
that, like
paid
3
for us
months?
to go to school, huh?
A semester's 3 months or
Yeah, we was on the
Semester was probably
6 weeks?
probably half a year, maybe.
We have 5 minutes.
Oh, wow, I can't get done in 5 minutes.
Hear that?
Okay, I'll just run through the slides then. How's that? Okay, here's a photo of the priest I don't know exactly who that would have been. Maybe J.J. Nevin, with the two altar boys carrying processional candles. And that's the old parish hall back there in the background. And they're going to, of course, they're going to Mass, processing to Mass at St. Peter Claver Church. St. Peter Claver parishioners with the Sisters of St. Joseph in front of the church. I've got to make this point with this slide. Whether fishermen, entrepreneurs, business owners, or laborers, whatever, God-fearing Christians and Catholics, blacks and whites, with their multiracial and diverse cultural backgrounds and shared values, form the heart and soul of a vibrant community from Old Town to New Town. St. Peter Claver School was renovated and is now used for our St. Michael Academy Kindergarten. And I'm gonna have to get through this.
1 minute.
The house directly
10 minutes.
no,
10 minutes.
the house directly across the street from the church on the corner of 4th and Broom. Now, our parish office was built by Leonela Villalonga for her niece, Edith Gordon, in the late 1800s. Edith was the valedictorian of St. Joseph's Academy class of 1899 and a musical protege. Miss Villalonga built the house when Edith outgrew the apartment that she shared with her Aunt Nilla above the convent kitchen. Owners of that house also included Thomas Patrick O'Hagan, principal keeper of the Amelia Island Lighthouse from 1905 to 1925. He and wife Julia had 12 children, and 2 of their sons, Thomas and David, were also lighthouse keepers. The youngest child, Rachel Cecilia O'Hagan, married Joseph Francis Bruni, and they also later owned that house. That's Nilla here on the left. That's Edith on the right. Nilla donated the Carrera marble altars in both St. Michael's Church. That's our altar. That's our high altar, and in the convent chapel at the attached to the academy. That Carrera marble was brought from Italy, came from the same quarry in northern Italy that Michelangelo used to sculpt the Pieta. It's Plaza San Carlos, where the Spanish built their fort in 1816. At Bosbello, you have the 19 grave sites of all 19 Sisters of St. Joseph who served in Fernandina at St. Michael's and with St. Peter Claver Catholic churches and schools. When Mother Antonio passed, when she died in August 1930, local businesses closed, and businessmen, Catholic, non-Catholic, black and white, they all participated in her funeral. Father P.J. Halligan, I can't say enough about him. Longest tenured pastor in St. Michael's history, 1935 and 1952. He's seen here with his 2 German shepherds, Tossie 1 and Tossie 2. And this is the best photo that I could find of Father Halligan. And he's there with the Bruni family, the sisters, and Joseph Francis Jr. And I have to say that Father Halligan, later married Mary Catherine Bruni to one of our well-known local shrimp boat captains, Cecil Bennett Sr., in 1950. And their 3 children are here tonight.
Stand up.
They're right back there. Julia, Cecilia, and Cecil Al Bennett Jr. And all 3 of them had experiences also attending both St. Michael's and St. Peter Claver churches, okay, growing up.
Stand up.
Which one is your mom?
Okay, COVID, that didn't keep us from Mass. It was Father Mark Waters who was almost solely responsible for renovating, for having St. Michael's Academy. Well, it wasn't St. Michael's Academy when he had it renovated. It became St. Michael's Academy when it reopened. It was his tenacity that convinced the diocese and the bishop that it had to be renovated, and it turned out to be one of the most magnificent renovation projects that we've ever had here in Fernandina Beach. This was it. This was it when it all started. When in 1997 there was an effort even by the Chancery of the diocese to have this all demolished. That was in 1975. And like I said earlier, if you don't believe in divine intervention, it was nothing less than divine intervention that saved St. Michael's Academy from being destroyed. And here it is, having the 3rd floor dormer windows and everything being added back, and the mansard roof, and the cupola. And that was another addition. It is now, it now serves as the academy now serves students from VPK through 8th grade. That's a contrast between what you saw just a little while ago and what it looks like today. Chimneys, cupola, mansard roof. It's and St. Michael's just celebrated its St. Michael Academy just celebrated its silver Jubilee anniversary in 2024, and just received the National Blue Ribbon Award for excellence. Skip through this, skip through this. Well, for those of you who haven't been inside the church lately, the restoration, of course, was referred to as a magnificent blended transformation of old and new.
And that's 2 pictures, right?
Yes. Looking toward the back of the church to the old to where the old balcony used to be and the front of the church. Celebrating Mass at the dedication. Oh, I did it again. The business manager at the time, who really did a lot of the legwork, Tom Habel, presenting the key to the newly renovated church to Bishop Estevez. That yellow house on the corner of 5th and Calhoun is used for our little angels in VPK. We also have the mission church constructed during that time. Sisters Josephine and Rose Paul, they joined our parish in February 2019 and helped us get through the pandemic. We live streamed all through the pandemic. This is the old red brick Rambler old office on the corner of 5th and Broome being demolished and making room for this, which was moved. The Liberty Billings house. Of course, Liberty Billings was posthumously awarded the honor of being a great Floridian. He was a lieutenant colonel in the 33rd Regiment, South Carolina Negro Regiment, was wounded, came to Fernandina, built this house. It was located on the center of 5th Street before it was moved. And it is also on the historic registry. Last but not least, as it is, history repeats itself and nothing occurs by chance. Those are my words. While we face the deadly challenge of a pandemic, much like our parish and community did in 1877 and 1888, we need only turn to one source for comfort and consolation, our Lord and Redeemer, Jesus Christ. And here we are, full circle now, and what we're trying to do is, Father Eric is trying to decide how we can best utilize this historic Catholic Church. Thank you. Sorry for going over.